The Life of Theseus. In the days when Athens was still young, when kings ruled from thrones of stone and the gods still walked among mortals, there was born a boy whose destiny would change the shape of Greece. His name was Theseus, and his tale is one of strength, cunning, love, and tragedy. The story of Theseus begins with his mother, Aethra, a princess of treason. One night, she lay with Aegeus, king of Athens, though some whispered that the sea god Poseidon also claimed the boy as his son. Thus Theseus, like many heroes of Greece, carried within him both mortal and divine blood. Before departing, Aegeus placed a sword and a pair of sandals beneath a great boulder and told Aethra, "When our child is strong enough to lift this stone, send him to Athens, and I shall know him as my son." So Theseus grew in treason, unaware of his father's throne, but blessed with strength that ripened early. While other boys struggled with simple tasks, Theseus mastered them with ease. He wrestled with older youths, ran swifter than deer across the hills, and his mind was as sharp as his limbs were strong. His mother watched with pride but also with caution, for destiny often demanded its due. When Theseus reached manhood, his mother revealed the truth. She led him to the boulder and bade him test his strength. Without hesitation, Theseus bent low, placed his hands upon the stone, and with a roar lifted it from the earth. Beneath lay the sandals and sword, gleaming as though they had been placed there only yesterday. Taking them in his hands, Theseus felt his lineage awaken within him. "Now, my son," said Aethra, "you must journey to Athens. There your father waits, though he knows it not." The sea offered a safe passage, but Theseus chose the land road instead. "What worth is a man who hides from peril?" he declared. "If I am to be king's son, let me prove it not by words, but by deeds." For the land road to Athens was infested with bandits and monsters, a gauntlet of trials that only the bravest could pass. Thus began his first labors. On the road near Epidaurus, he met Periphetes, the club-bearer. This brute smashed travelers' skulls with a bronze mace. Theseus, undaunted, wrestled him, tore the club from his hands, and slew him. From then on, the club was Theseus' own weapon, a symbol of his strength. Further along, he encountered Cenes, the pine-bender, who tied men to bent trees and tore them apart when the trunks snapped upright. Theseus gave him the taste of his own cruelty, binding him to 2 pines and letting the earth avenge the innocent. At Crommyon, he slew a monstrous sow that ravaged the countryside. Then he faced Sciron, who forced travelers to wash his feet before kicking them into the sea to be devoured by a giant turtle. Theseus cast him into the waves instead. Near Eleusis, he fought Cercyon, a king who challenged all to wrestling and killed them. Theseus matched his skill with not only strength but cunning, and broke him upon the ground. Finally, he met Procrustes, the stretcher, who offered travelers a bed, then cut down or stretched their limbs to fit it. Theseus ended his cruelty by giving him the same fate upon his iron bed. By the time Theseus reached Athens, his name was already legend. The road was cleansed of monsters, and the people whispered of a hero who righted wrongs with his own hands. In Athens, however, danger still awaited. King Aegeus did not at once recognize his son. Worse, the sorceress Medea, who dwelled in Athens after fleeing Corinth, saw in Theseus a threat to her power. She whispered lies into Aegeus' ear, convincing him that the youth was an enemy plotting his throne. At a feast, she offered Theseus a cup of poisoned wine. But before he could drink, Theseus revealed the sword of his lineage. Aegeus' eyes widened with recognition, and he dashed the cup aside. With joy, he embraced his son, and Medea fled into exile. Theseus was hailed as Prince of Athens, beloved by the people for his deeds. Yet his destiny was not to rest in his father's halls. For Athens groaned under a dreadful tribute. Every 9 years, 7 youths and 7 maidens were sent across the sea to Crete, to be devoured by the Minotaur, a beast half man, half bull, born of King Minos' wife and the bull of Poseidon. When the time came for this tribute again, Theseus rose. "I will go as one of the 14, he declared, "and end this curse. Either I shall slay the monster, or I shall die, and Athens shall be free of shame." The people wept, but he would not be swayed. Before he departed, he made a pact with his father. "I shall sail with black sails," he said, "but if I return victorious, I will change them to white, so you shall know from afar." So Theseus journeyed to Crete, his heart steadfast. There, in the palace of Knossos, he came before King Minos, proud and stern, and Queen Pasiphae, whose sin had birthed the Minotaur. Among them was Ariadne, their daughter, whose eyes lingered upon Theseus. Struck by his courage and beauty, she resolved to help him, for love had ensnared her heart. On the eve of his trial, Ariadne came to him in secret. She gave him a ball of thread and a sword, whispering, "The labyrinth is a maze without end. Unwind this thread behind you, so you may find your way back. And with this sword, strike the beast." Theseus took her gift with gratitude and promised that if he survived, he would take her with him, away from Crete. At dawn, he entered the labyrinth. Its walls twisted endlessly, corridors folding upon themselves, silence heavy as stone. The air was thick with the stench of blood, for many had perished there before. But Theseus pressed on, unwinding the thread, his hand tight on the sword. From the darkness came the sound of hooves, the rumble of breath, and the gleam of horns. The Minotaur charged, monstrous and relentless. Its roar shook the walls, its bulk filled the passage. But Theseus did not falter. He met the beast head-on, dodging its horns, striking with his blade. They struggled fiercely, man against monster, until at last Theseus drove the sword into its heart. The Minotaur fell, its bellow fading into silence. With the thread, Theseus retraced his steps and emerged victorious. Ariadne awaited him, and together they fled Crete, taking the other youths with them. Yet fate, ever cruel, would not grant them peace. On the island of Naxos, Theseus abandoned Ariadne. Some say it was the will of the gods, for Dionysus claimed her as his bride. Others say Theseus feared her wrathful father. Whatever the reason, Ariadne awoke to find herself alone, her heart broken. Theseus sailed on, but grief shadowed his return. For in his haste, he forgot his promise to change the sails from black to white. King Aegeus, watching from the cliffs of Athens, saw the black sails approaching. Believing his son dead, despair overcame him, and he cast himself into the sea that now bears his name, the Aegean. When Theseus stepped ashore, triumphant yet weary, the people hailed him as king. But his joy was bitter, for his father was gone, and the crown came stained with sorrow. Thus Theseus rose to rule Athens, not only as a hero but as a king. His reign was marked by reforms, uniting the scattered villages of Attica into one city, forging Athens into the heart of Greece. Yet his life, like that of all heroes, was not free from tragedy. Though sorrow weighed heavy on his crown, Theseus resolved to rule with wisdom. He remembered the roads he had cleared of monsters, the people he had freed from cruelty, and he swore to make Athens a city of justice. He united the scattered villages of Attica into a single state, binding them not by chains but by law and shared purpose. The festival of Panathenea was born under his rule, drawing citizens together in games and worship. Athens, once divided, now breathed as one. Yet kingship did not silence the hero's spirit. Theseus, restless as the sea, sought new trials. His heart longed for adventure, and often he left his throne to wander the paths of danger. It was in such days that his bond with Pirithous, king of the Lapiths, was forged, a bond of friendship and rivalry, for each was drawn to the other's courage. Their first meeting was born of challenge. Hearing of Theseus' strength, Pirithous stole cattle from Marathon, daring him to pursue. Theseus confronted him, and the two warriors clashed, their blows shaking the ground. Yet neither prevailed. At last, each recognized the other's valor, and laughter replaced swords. They swore an oath of brotherhood, sealing a friendship that would shape their fates. It was at Pirithous' wedding to Hippodamia that one of their most famous battles erupted. The guests included centaurs, half-man and half-horse, who drank too deeply of wine. Inflamed with lust and rage, they seized the bride and other women, dragging them away. Chaos filled the hall. But Theseus and Pirithous rose like lions, leading the Lapiths in defense. The clash of men and centaurs echoed through Thessaly, a battle of civilization against wildness. Theseus struck down Eurytion, leader of the centaurs, and drove the creatures into the hills. Thus was the battle of the centaurs and Lapiths won, remembered in carvings and stone. Yet friendship led Theseus into darker paths. Together with Pirithous, he swore to marry daughters of Zeus himself. Theseus set his eyes upon Helen, daughter of Zeus and Leda, whose beauty would one day set Troy aflame. She was but a girl when Theseus abducted her, keeping her in Attica until her brothers, Castor and Pollux, rescued her. The rashness of youth marred his honor, though in time the Greeks forgave, for heroes were often judged more by their victories than their crimes. Pirithous, however, was not so fortunate. He sought Persephone, queen of the underworld, as his bride. Theseus, bound by oath, accompanied him to Hades itself. There they approached the throne of Hades, demanding the bride of death. The lord of the underworld feigned hospitality, inviting them to sit. But the moment they touched the stone seats, they found themselves bound fast, held by enchantment. There they remained, trapped in shadow, until Heracles descended during his own labors. Mighty Heracles freed Theseus, breaking the bonds with divine strength. But Pirithous was left behind, condemned for his audacity. Theseus returned to the world of light, but he carried with him the memory of his friend's folly, a scar upon his soul. Not all of Theseus' deeds were dark. When the Amazons, fierce warrior women, came to Greece, Theseus led men against them. In some tales, he abducted Antiope, their queen; in others, they fell in love. From their union was born Hippolytus, his son. Yet this victory brought war, for the Amazons marched on Athens in vengeance. Battle raged in the very heart of the city, but Theseus stood firm, driving them back. Peace was made, though Antiope perished in the conflict, leaving Theseus bereft of her fierce companionship. As king, Theseus walked a path between heroism and hubris. His reforms strengthened Athens, yet his thirst for glory often pulled him into peril. He journeyed to Calydon to hunt the monstrous boar that ravaged the land, standing among heroes like Atalanta and Meleager. He sailed with Jason and the Argonauts in search of the Golden Fleece, his club striking down foes beside Heracles' strength and Orpheus' song. Wherever heroes gathered, Theseus was among them, his name inseparable from the fabric of Greek legend. But with time, the weight of sorrow grew. His choices left trails of tragedy. Hippolytus, his son, would one day be destroyed by his father's curse, tangled in the lies of Phaedra, Theseus' later wife. His friendship with Pirithous ended in the depths of Hades. Ariadne, who had saved his life, was left upon a lonely shore. Again and again, Theseus found victory on the battlefield but loss in the quiet chambers of love and loyalty. And yet, for all his flaws, the people of Athens loved him. They saw in him not a flawless god, but a man who wrestled with both monsters and mistakes. He embodied their city, brilliant and bold, yet prone to hubris, ever striving toward greatness though burdened with errors. In his later years, the tides of fortune turned against him. Political strife rose in Athens. Some whispered that his power had grown too great, that he no longer listened to the will of the people. Rivals stirred dissent, and the glory that had crowned his youth began to fade. He set sail for Syros, seeking refuge or perhaps renewal. But there, treachery awaited. King Lycomedes, whether out of fear or jealousy, betrayed him. He lured Theseus to a cliff under pretense of friendship, then cast him down into the sea. Thus ended the life of the hero king, not in battle with beasts or foes, but in betrayal by mortal hands. His body was lost to the waves, though his spirit lingered in Athens' heart. Centuries later, when Athens grew mighty and proud, his remains were said to be recovered and laid to rest in the city. Temples were built in his honor, and his name became a rallying cry for unity and justice. Theseus, the slayer of the Minotaur, the uniters of Attica, the man who walked with both gods and men, was remembered as more than a king. He was the spirit of Athens itself. The death of Theseus on the cliffs of Scyros marked the end of a mortal life, but not the end of his story. Heroes of Greece were never confined to flesh alone, they lived on in memory, myth, and the souls of the people who carried their names into ages yet unborn. When word of his death reached Athens, the city mourned. Old men remembered the youth who had cleared the roads of bandits and beasts, making travel safe for farmers and traders. Women whispered of the prince who had faced the Minotaur, freeing their children from the terror of Crete. Soldiers recalled the king who had fought beside them in battle, who bore not only a crown but also a sword. For all his flaws and follies, Theseus was theirs, a son of Athens, a figure both human and heroic. In time, Cimon, the great Athenian general, claimed to have recovered his bones from Scyros and brought them back to the city. A grand tomb was raised in the heart of Athens, a sanctuary for the oppressed, a place where the weak might find protection. Even in death, Theseus was remembered not only as a warrior but as a defender of the people. But what is the measure of Theseus' life? To answer that, one must look beyond the deeds themselves, into the pattern woven by fate. Theseus was a hero of contradictions. He was both liberator and betrayer, both uniters and destroyer. He cleared the road of monsters, yet abandoned Ariadne, who had saved him. He fought beside Pirithous as a brother, yet followed him into folly. He built a city of laws, yet often defied them himself. His victories were great, but his failures equally profound. And perhaps that is why he endured. For in Theseus, the Greeks saw not a god distant in perfection, but a man who struggled, who stumbled, who bore the weight of error and still pressed on. He was a mirror of the human soul, caught between the hunger for greatness and the chains of mortality. The tale of Theseus is most often remembered through the labyrinth and the Minotaur, yet that was only one moment of his life. Consider the road to Athens, where each bandit he slew symbolized the chaos of a wild world, and his triumph brought order. Consider his reforms in Attica, which gave birth to the unity that made Athens strong. Consider the Amazon War, where love and violence intertwined, leaving both glory and grief. Consider his descent with Pirithous into Hades, where friendship tested the limits of hubris. Each tale, each fragment, reveals a facet of the man. His story was sung not only in Greece but far beyond. In Rome, poets invoked his name alongside Aeneas, placing him among the founders of civilization. In later centuries, artists carved his deeds into marble, painted his triumphs on walls, and wove his myths into plays. Theseus became more than a hero, he became a symbol of the eternal struggle for justice, even when justice falters, and for courage, even when courage fails. Yet for all the grandeur, let us not forget the man who stood upon the shore of Naxos, staring at the sleeping Ariadne he would abandon. Let us not forget the father who cursed his son Hippolytus in anger, bringing about his death through lies and misfortune. Let us not forget the king who was betrayed in Syros, his body dashed upon the rocks. Theseus' greatness was bound to his flaws, and it was this duality that made him real in the hearts of his people. In the quiet halls of memory, Theseus might have sat beside other heroes, Heracles with his lion's skin, Perseus with the head of Medusa, Achilles with his burning wrath. Yet Theseus stood apart. For while others sought glory in battle against beasts and enemies, Theseus sought to shape a city, to bind a people, to build something lasting beyond himself. And Athens, in its golden age, remembered him not merely as a warrior but as the father of its unity. The Parthenon rose in splendor, philosophers walked its streets, artists filled its temples, and behind it all, the spirit of Theseus lingered, the king who had once bound Attica together. Even today, his story endures. The word labyrinth still conjures his courage, the Minotaur still roars in the imagination of poets, his name still echoes as the embodiment of daring and destiny. He is a reminder that greatness is not the absence of failure, but the will to rise after it. If we look to the stars, we may find him there, not in a single constellation like Perseus or Hercules, but in the spirit of the hero who walks the border between man and myth. For Theseus, true immortality is not written in heavens or temples but in the idea he left behind, that even flawed men can change the world, that even broken paths can lead to greatness, that even sorrow can birth unity. Thus the life of Theseus comes to its close. He was born in mystery, raised in strength, tested by monsters and kings. He won love and lost it, forged friendships and broke them, ruled with justice yet stumbled with pride. He was betrayed, yet in death became a symbol of hope. Theseus was not a perfect hero. He was something greater, a human one. And for that reason, his name will never fade.